week 14 of the fantasy football season, and here are the top 12 tight ends I'm ranking this week. The first guy, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. So who else would it be at number one this season here? Travis Kelce, pretty much each and every week, 20-plus fantasy points you're going to get out of him. Him and Patrick Mahomes, they have one of the best connections in all pro football, from quarterback to receiver or tight end, whatever you want to call it. And this week here at Denver, a team he's owned throughout his career, I think Kelce has a big ball game in this one, and the Chiefs get back on track after a tough loss at the Cincinnati Bengals, where Kelce and Mahomes having big games this week. Number 2, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So we know Lamar Jackson's out, and obviously Andrews' numbers have taken a hit for whatever reason the last few weeks. But I think Tyler Huntley in this one could get Andrews the ball early and often. Last season, Andrew had some big ball games when Huntley filled in for that 3 or 4 game stretch for Lamar Jackson. And Huntley's definitely a capable quarterback. He's a guy that I actually have confidence in this week here as a top 12 quarterback. And I think he could get the ball to Andrews. Andrews has a great track record, obviously, versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this week here, he's number 2. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. So right here, TJ Hawkinson and the Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions in Detroit. So right now, going back versus former team. And I thought it was kind of odd, obviously, that Hawkinson got traded within the division. Now it's a revenge game over here for Hawkinson going to Detroit. So right now, Hawkinson having a great season. Him and Kirk Cousins building a rapport better each week in and week out for this Viking team. And he's a top 3, top 4 tight end each and every week. I know last week the stats weren't really there, but this week in a game versus former team, you know he's going to want to stick it to them. And I got him at 3. Number 4, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dalton Schultz, he's been pretty solid over the last month of the season since Dak Prescott's returned to the starting lineup. So right now, this Houston Texan defense doesn't stop anyone. Dalton Schultz, we know he's got good yard after catch ability and a good red zone threat, obviously, for Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys that are going to have their way, you would think, in this ball game. So Dalton Schultz this week, I think, is a good tight end option, and I wouldn't be surprised if he could finish within the top 4 at number 4. Number 5, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So it's unfortunate Jimmy Garoppolo's out for at least the regular season now with the broken foot. And George Kittle, he's been a hot and cold type of tight end this season. This week here, it's a tough matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that are bend but don't break type of defense. But I would think the youngster Brock Purdy's going to want to lean on his safety blanket at the tight end position in George Kittle. And I know Kittle's been in there as a blocker a lot as well this season, with the addition of McCaffrey, another guy to add to the passing game, obviously with Debo and Brandon Ayuk. But this week here in big situations in a tough matchup versus Tampa Bay, I think they're going to lean on Kittle a little bit more, and he's going to run a little bit more routes. So this week I got him at 5. Number 6, Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. Gerald Everett, he's been a solid Charger this season here in his first season with this Charger team. And a tight end who's athletic, he could go out there and make plays. And when you got a good quarterback like Justin Herbert, anything's possible, obviously, for a receiver or a tight end to have a good fantasy day. And this week here in a matchup versus the Miami Dolphins, I think Gerald Everett could go out there and have a decent fantasy day here. This Miami Dolphin defense, they haven't really done much this season here in terms of stopping people. And this week, I don't think they'll stop Everett. Everett last week, a nice fantasy day. I think anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points at minimum we could see from him. And this week, I got him at 6 because he could take advantage of the middle of the field. And with Keenan Allen back and possibly Mike Williams, that could open the middle of the field up even more for Gerald Everett to do damage. So I got him at 6. Number 7, Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Pat Freiermuth, he's been one of the better guys on the Steeler team this year here because they just had problems getting the ball to Deontay Johnson consistent. George Pickens, he's been up and down for the Steeler team, but it seems like each and every week Pat Freiermuth is the main target or one of the main targets and targets for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. So right here, it's a decent matchup versus the Ravens. Obviously a team that he's pretty familiar with so far in his young NFL career. And I think in this one he'll have a decent ball game and get peppered with at least 7 or 8 targets in this one. And to be honest, tight ends week this week here and this season for the most part as well. Number 8, Greg Dulcich of the Denver Broncos. So right here, most of these guys on this list from 8 to 12, to be honest, could go either way. 2 fantasy points or maybe 10 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But Greg Dulcich, at least he's been the mainstay of the offense over the last 6 weeks, even though he had 3 good weeks and 3 mediocre to poor weeks, and then last week finally bounced back was Dulcich with a good ball game. And in this one versus the Kansas City Chiefs, you know the Broncos are going to be chasing points Russell Wilson, him and Dolchik have a decent rapport. Sutton doesn't play, that's even more targets. Most likely going to Greg Dolchik. And this week, I'm just going to roll the dice with him in a ball game where obviously they're going to probably be chasing points. I got him at 8. Number 9, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another guy you want to talk about inconsistency. 1 week he could go for 13, and the next week 1 or 2 fantasy points. So this week here at the Tennessee Titans, not the greatest of matchups here for Evan Ingram and this Jacksonville Jaguar team within the division ball game. But Evan Ingram, we know he's an athletic tight end, but he's never really lived up to the potential. So this week, I don't think these guys are great options at all, really. And it's about catching lightning in a bottle and get a little bit lucky. But I got Ingram at 9. Number 10, Foster Moreau of the Vegas Raiders. So this week here at the Los Angeles Rams, I think he could make a few plays, is Foster Moreau. I know last week he only had 1 catch for 32 yards in that ball game, was Moreau. But I think this week he could bounce back. Indoor game, which is always great once again at the Los Angeles Rams, where their team's decimated. And we don't know for sure if Aaron Donald's going to play in this one, because week 13, Donald sat out in that one, and that one, the short week, we'll see what happens with that, with this ball game being here on Thursday Night Football. But anyway, Foster Moreau could be a red zone threat, and this is the last week he's possibly good anyway here for this team, with Darren Waller saying week 15 he's going to come back to the starting lineup. So maybe in his farewell here, Moreau could put in a decent game. And I got him at 10. Number 11, Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. Fant, he's been a hit-or-miss tight end all season in his first year with the Seahawks. But this week here, it's a pretty decent matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, where their defense on the road really hasn't stopped anyone this season. Noah Fant and Geno Smith is starting to get on the same page of late. And he's been a decent red zone threat of late as well here as Fant. We know people expected big things from him with the Denver Broncos, but that obviously didn't come to fruition, and he was in the Russell Wilson trade. And right here, I think this week here, Fant could be a decent option, or he could totally dud out from 8 to 12. Like I said, that's what I'm expecting, either a great game or duds this week. But I got Fant at 11, and the 12th and final tight end I'm ranking this week's Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. I know it hasn't been a great year. I know he don't really get the football a lot, is Hunter Henry, but just on the way of the matchup here, the Arizona Cardinals top 3 and giving up fantasy points to tight ends on the season is why I'm going to take advantage of that. And this Patriot team, they do want to stretch the field more as Mac Jones and get that ball down the field, where they could maybe work the seam with Hunter Henry versus the middle of that Cardinal defense, which obviously isn't that great. So this week here, maybe Henry could have a pop game out of nowhere at Arizona, and we've seen a couple of them this season, and maybe this week it could happen once again. So that's the top 12 tight ends I'm ranking for week 14 of the fantasy football season.